Good morning. Being 9 a.m., I'll call to order the McHenry County Board Committee of the Whole meeting of August 10th, 2023. Ms. Von Bergen will lead us in the pledge this morning.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Kathy, could you call the roll, please?
Carolyn Campbell. Here. Joseph Gottemoller. Here. Terry Greeno. Here. Eric Hendricks. Carl Kaminsky.
Present.
James Kearns.
Here.
Matthew Kunkel.
Here.
Teresa Meshes.
Here.
Lou Ness.
Here.
John Reinhardt.
Here.
Brian Sager. Michael Shorten.
Here.
Michael Scala.
Present.
Larry Smith.
Here.
Gloria Van Hoff.
Present.
Tracy Von Bergen.
Here.
Kelly Wegner.
Here.
Chairman Bueller.
Here. Okay. Having a quorum, we'll proceed. Good morning. If the board would indulge me, I would like to start our meeting with a moment of silence in honor of McHenry County Division of Transportation employee Kevin Winter, who was killed over the weekend in a motorcycle accident, and also in honor of the family in unincorporated Crystal Lake that was victim to a senseless act of violence early yesterday morning. Let us bow our heads and take a moment to remember those who have passed and pray for the speedy recovery of the injured, and also reflect on how such tragedies affect us all in McHenry County. Thank you. I have a handful of items to share with you before we get to next Tuesday's agenda. But before that, we'll be getting two presentations. County Administrator Pete Austin and CFO Carrie Wise will update us on the fiscal year 2024 budget under development. And then Assistant County Engineer Daryl Kuntz will give us a presentation and overview of the Wetland Banking Program. It's another year and another successful McHenry County Fair. The 75th one, to be exact, is in the books. It was great. It was a lot of fun, and I hope all of you had a chance to go to the fairgrounds and enjoy it yourselves. On Wednesday, August 2nd, I had the honor of attending the ceremony at which the Building D Meeting Hall was renamed in honor of longtime WGN radio agribusiness reporter Orion Samuelson and his 6 decades on the radio. If you've never seen him, you've surely heard his booming voice on AM 720 for the Noon Farm Report. I also had the distinct honor of presenting Mr. Samuelson and his wife Gloria with a copy of the proclamation we'll be voting on next Tuesday, honoring him and his legacy and everything he's done for agriculture. I've been asked to join the advisory board of the Northeast Multi-Regional Training Association, which is a not-for-profit agency dedicated to providing high-quality and cost-effective training programs and classes for law enforcement. I have agreed to fill the slot on the 16-member board that must be held by a county board chairman, and I look forward to serving them and the law enforcement community. And finally, this morning, Valley High Nursing and Rehab has cordially invited the county board to its family picnic, which will take place from noon to 3 p.m. Saturday, August 26th. Lunch will be served at noon. The cost is $5 per person, and you can RSVP by calling 815-338-0312 before Wednesday, August 23rd. I hope you can make it and see all the great things that Valley High does for our senior residents and McHenry County. And that concludes my remarks this morning. Do any members have comments today? Ms. Greeno?
This week, our business celebrated our 20 years of anniversary being in business. When we opened our doors on August 11th of 2003, we could not have foreseen that we would create and put 26,000 people to work in jobs in our local economy in McHenry County. Small and medium-sized businesses account for 85% of the job creation in the U.S. economy. Bureaucrats may tend to see the pie as a fixed pie in the economy, meaning that everyone that wants a bigger piece of pie, someone else has to get a smaller piece of pie. And they are correct. The public sector cannot create wealth. The private sector follows the free market capitalist model in our country, increasing the size of the pie, allowing more people to get more pie. We have, so this creates growth in our economy. As we enter this budget season, it would be good for us to remember this.
Ms. Wagner?
Thank you. As Chairman Bueller mentioned, there was an incident at unincorporated Crystal Lake yesterday, and thank you for the moment of silence. 4 people have died and 1 is injured due to gunshots. First, I want to thank the Sheriff's Office for being at that home and taking care of the individuals involved and investigating the tragedy. What you had to do was something most people couldn't even imagine doing, and thank you for putting yourself in harm's way, physically and mentally, to take care of our residents. We speak about the need for mental health services, especially when we discuss gun violence, and this is hitting close to home. I'm willing to assume that if a gun were not in the home or the gun was secured, this level of violence might not have occurred. So please keep this in mind when we discuss firearm safety and mental health. Thank you.
Ms. Ness?
After 22 years in the domestic violence movement, and Chairman Bueller, thank you for your words this morning, it is clear, at least to me, and until more evidence produces itself, we really can't call it such. The killing in Crystal Lake was domestic violence. 1 in 4 women will be a victim of domestic violence. 48% of women who die at the hands of their perpetrator die when they make that decision to leave. Unfortunately, and I would like to say that all of our work in the domestic violence movement has reduced these incidences, and it has not. And so I urge all of my fellow board members to think when Turning Point comes for money to increase their budget in this year's budget cycle, we remember that this kind of violence occurs right here in McHenry County and is occurring even as we speak in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments, we'll move on to public comment. Each individual who has checked the box to speak, I will call on, and they can come up and speak at the microphone here. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comments. When the red light comes on in front of me, I would ask you to summarize your comments if you haven't already. It does appear that we have many people here speaking on the same subject, so if you hear what you want to speak about mentioned already, I would ask that you adjust your comments accordingly so we could proceed in an efficient manner. So, thank you. First one up will be Kathy Johnson, followed by William Barrett.
Good morning. I'm Kathy Johnson. I live at 8610 South Hill Road, south of Marengo in this wonderful precinct of Riley. And so I just want to tell you, I've been living there for 40 years, and I was on the township, I was a township trustee, I was on the township plan commission, I was on the water task force here in the county that lasted 40 years, I was on the Marengo Library Board. And so you can see I have a vested interest in this precinct, and so it's really important to me. And I raised my children there, and I taught at Riley School even for 12 years. So I just want to tell you, I am thrilled when I heard about the Plowshare Solar Community Farm, and which will be about 1.5 miles from my house. It's very close, and it's something that not only do we need in the county, we need in the state, we need in this country. We need to start working on reducing our fossil fuel usage. So anyway, you subscribe, you save money, you with your electric bill. So right off the bat, you save money with your electric bill. It provides tax revenue for the for Riley School and for Marengo High School and for any other taxing bodies in the area, which is my goodness, that's huge. If you, and if they subscribe, there's more benefits to them. It's a win-win situation, and so when I look at this, I just see how excited I am about it. And so one of the joys is it's going to be landscaped with the pollinator-friendly plants, which is what I use in my yard. I have I've got 2.5 acres. I use them all the time. So it's wonderful. So, but I have heard through the grapevine that there are people that think it's not very nice looking, which is kind of silly, because if you've been to Riley Township, if any of you have been to Riley Township, it's going to be located right by the tollway, which is lit up at night. It's because that's where the entrance to Route 23 is. And so there's lights the whole night. And if you turn around and you look to the back, there's a gravel pit. And then there's another gravel pit, and there's another gravel pit, and there's another gravel pit. We are inundated with gravel pits, and you know what? They're not so pretty. There's noisy. They're dusty. The trucks are not very nice. I have put up with them for 40 years. So
Summarize your comments, please.
I will be glad to. And so we have something positive. We have an opportunity. And I think we need to grab it if we can. And I am sure hoping that District 9 County Board members will be part of the group that will be voting for this, because it is for the people. Thank you very much.
William Barrett, followed by Aaron Kennedy.
Hi, I'm William Barrett. I live on 8904 Nilsson Court out in unincorporated Harvard out here. And I brought a letter down here yesterday. I don't know if any of you got a copy of it from us. Did you get a copy to read? Okay, cool. Well, anyway, I'm going to keep it short. Our neighborhood is a group of 17 homes. We all have 5-acre plots. And this year we got a rodeo started on Graff Road, which all our properties wrap around. And the people that are running the rodeo are excessively loud. The music was so loud this time that we couldn't speak in our driveway. And as the crow flies, I'm about 2/3 of a mile from this place. The garbage on the road the next morning, the beer cans, the mud, totally what happens to all of us is that our lives stop while he's having that rodeo. And I understand that the permit's been already issued for September 24th, and there's nothing you can do about it. But what we're requesting in the letter that you have here somewhere, but I want more police presence in our neighborhood without us having to call. We shouldn't have to call you guys with this going on, with all the information we've already gathered over the year. You guys should have police there so we don't have to keep calling you. And someone's got to monitor what goes on when he cleans up after such, and the traffic. And, you know, I believe that you really need to look at your rules. We see Boone County having the same problem. They looked at their rules. People tell me some of them are enforced, some of them are not. If you're able to change the rules, it needs to address the fact that somebody's events.
Summarize your comments, please.
Pardon me?
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Proceed.
I'm done?
No, you got one more minute. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Wrong light.
I'd like you to look at the areas that the rodeos or the whatevers are in, concerts, whatever, because you'll see on the map that our properties wrap this guy's property. And so we're his total locked-in audience, okay? And I'll speak again if you ever have time for me, but I don't want to carry on too much. You got a lot of people here today, so that'll be that.
Thank you. Aaron Kennedy, followed by J.H. Lane, is it?
Ready?
Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Erin Kennedy, and I am the Executive Director for the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County. For those of you that are familiar with our organization, we've really enjoyed working with you in the past. And for those of you that might not be familiar, the Defenders have advocated for the environment in McHenry County for more than 50 years. You should have all received information from me about our position on solar farms in the county. And I wanted to reiterate our support for solar as stated in our position paper. We believe it is one of the best ways to reduce fossil fuel emissions, to preserve our topsoil, to replenish our groundwater, and to promote native plants and pollinator species within the county. We remain deeply disappointed that the state has undone some of the important county siting standards we advocated for, but generally are supportive of solar here in McHenry County. We hope to see the county approve these projects in a fashion that will ensure that they are able to be built, and we have the utmost faith in the county staff to ensure the safety, the health, and welfare concerns expressed are resolved in the building permitting stage. As indicated in the ZBA hearing, the Defenders are working with Trajectory Energy Partners on the Riley Township Plowshare project. We look forward to helping them develop the site plan that is consistent with low-profile native plant species and the ground cover requirement, as well as the establishment and maintenance standards that our organization helped create. They have experience with this and have several farms operating within the state that are managed consistent with our values. We are extremely excited to work to re-grant the funds received from Trajectory within Riley Township, and we have many ideas and partnerships and project ideas that will improve the environment that we hope to accomplish when the project is completed. The Defenders are always available to educate and to answer any questions that you may have about solar. So please feel free to reach out to us if you would like to discuss the concerns related to the environment within McHenry County. Thank you for your time.
J.H. Lane or Lampy, is it? I'm sorry.
Lampy.
Couldn't read it, sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm Jack Lampy. I live 4203 Sunnyside Road, Woodstock. I spent about 51 years in the corporate community. I'm currently a farmer and working on some independent contractor materials. But I'm speaking to the Ocock Road solar plan, and I'm also pro-solar and pro-energy conservation. And I'm concerned about this project in the sense that this is an outside company we have no familiarity with, and having looked at the parameters that are currently existing, I think there's a lacking of defined assessment of the company viability, and I think it needs to be documented in the process as this thing moves forward. There seems to be little accountability or corrective actions for things that could occur during a project of this size. I think the site species need to cover all aspects of the proposed plan, including fencing with sheep, weed control, vegetation while it's established, and maintenance for the 4 or 5 years that wildflowers, pollinators, and others are required to establish. I think the adjacent properties in this case will all be negatively impacted. It will landlock the village of Union. It will shut off a lot of the opportunities the Illinois Railway Commission has for expansion, and it will deprive Union of any other additional business expansions into this area. Not to mention, this is one of the more fertile fields in the state of Illinois that we're going to cover with panels. So while I'm endorsing solar, I think there are alternative areas that we could still fulfill the need of alternative energy, sustainable energy, without taking away farmland. I think considering the factual material that we've seen in the previous board meetings, and I fully understand the law that the governor put us in place in January as guidance. I think in this case it just about needs to be guidance opposed to the law. These are first-year laws. It's very uncommon are very common for laws after initial implementation that are going to require a little reconnoitering to make them workable. And I think this is one of those examples. So I'm asking you to consider an exception in this case to the law that we are currently guided by. But at the same time, for my earlier comments, hold this company 100% accountable with metrics to measure impacts of the soil and water, the runoff.
If you could summarize your comments, please.
Is that it?
If you could summarize your comments, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. So I think in the future, HB 4412 needs an amendment. I think that could happen with your endorsement and your fellow, your colleagues in the fellow counties. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning.
Becky Lampe, followed by Stefan Ganvik.
Good morning. I'm Becky Lampe. I'm the wife of Jack Lampe, but that's not my claim to fame. For more than 50 years, I've been involved as an RN and a paramedic. I'm a charter member, actually, of the Emergency Medical Services in Algonquin and Lake in the Hills. That really goes back. Anyhow, I've also been a longtime volunteer with the McHenry County Medical Reserve Corps, which is a very good organization. I'm further trained in occupational health, hazmat, incident command, confined entry, and I'm trained and retrained on weather spotting. So my concern, as this climate change is occurring, I know we need to come up with some alternative forms. I'm not against solar per se, because I think it's wonderful on homes. However, I too am against the one that is on Ocock Road in Union, because that's just in such proximity to residences and wells. And anyhow, my concerns about them also include, since we know the temperature's rising over solar fields, the one that will be on Ocock Road, the company predicts that it will go from 5.2 degrees to 7.8, possibly increase in temperature in that area. And so my question is, if we're trying to cool our climate, how are we, maybe we're adding to it by having so many big fields. Anyhow, and there's new technologies coming along. There's brilliant minds. There's so many people working on alternative forms. I just read about one in Wall Street Journal about 3 weeks ago that really got me excited. Right now, I don't have that with me, but there are new technologies that won't make you trade off farmland for having solar panels on there.
If you could summarize your comments, please.
Okay. Anyhow, so here is what I would like. I would like an immediate on-site assessment after each severe storm. Who and how often will normal routine inspections be done? Damaged panels have potential to contaminate soil and water. What about heavy snow, ice storm, wind, rain, flying birds, flying debris? All of these would fall upon the volunteer fire department of Union, Illinois.
Please summarize your comments, ma'am. We have at least 20 other people that need to speak here today. So.
Okay, all right. But anyhow, so I speak also support those volunteer firemen who will need training, financial resources, and other things before any of this would get passed.
Thank you. Stefan Ganvik, followed by Joy Ganvik.
Good morning. My name is Stefan Ganvik, and I own a company that supplies fluid handling equipment, and I have dealt extensively with environmental remediation and cleanup at a variety of sites, including the famous Tekaloy and Arnold Engineering. So I'm intimately familiar with groundwater contamination and those issues. I understand that after the House Bill 4412 was passed into law, the existing safeguards for zoning, including land use from Plan 2005 and the new revised Plan 2030, have been negated. Our power has been removed by Governor Pritzker. AMP Energy's application for the Union Ocock facility is over 127 pages long. I'm sure that most of you, if you did read all 127 pages, maybe have forgotten some of those issues that are in there. In addition to those 127 pages, there were a number of addendums. I would like to address one of the addendums. It is a report generated by the McHenry Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District dated April 5th, 2023. It's their natural resource report, so feel free to take a look at this. They clearly indicate that the geological features of this parcel are comprised of an A1, which basically means it has high aquifer contamination potential. It is the highest level of contamination potential of all soil properties. They also designated the entire area as a sensitive aquifer recharge area. And 99.69% of the parcel is rated as highly permeable. What that means is with the high groundwater that this property has of sometimes 4 feet, is highly likely to be contaminated in the event of an accident. But I'm not going to talk about an accident. I'm going to tell you that the thousands of galvanized poles that AMP Energy is anticipating on inserting into the ground for the rack mount system have the high potential to contaminate the groundwater with zinc. Zinc is a heavy metal comparable to lead. Zinc itself in a galvanized material is not necessarily an issue when it's just exposed to earth. But when it is inserted directly into water, which this will be, zinc contamination will occur. We've supplied the board with information that clearly indicates from multiple sources on how zinc contamination can affect people and property. Our drinking water comes from this groundwater. The American Galvanizers Association, the EPA, and the State of Washington Department of Ecology all have published peer-reviewed documents indicating that this is not a potential accident. It will occur. Will it occur in a year, 2 years, 3 years? We don't know. But the fact that we don't know.
If you could summarize your comments, please.
The fact that we don't know is the issue. With our hands being tied by the new law, we can certainly see that we can work with the law. Item 3 in their application clearly indicates that it will not create a short-term issue or change the character of the neighborhood or provide any type of issues that would provide health and safety. This is a health and safety issue. Siting this solar plant, not a garden, on this property is comparable to inserting or building a skyscraper on a fault for an earthquake. An accident can occur, and you are now aware of what the potential ramifications could be. Thank you.
Joy Ganvik, followed by Terry Kappel.
Hi, I'm Joy Ganvik. I'm going to talk about the same Ocock Road solar facility. And I brought my own little timer, so I'll be sharp on that. The first thing is, I want to say that I am also pro renewable energy. I'm very much in favor of renewable energy. We have children, and we hope to have grandchildren, and I care about our planet. And so this is not about should we have solar or not have solar. I'm also in favor, however, of having a consistent food supply and having clean and ample water supply. And those things, I think, are all things that we need to care about and need to be traded off from time to time, depending, and especially where we live with the fertility of our farmland. So as you're considering these trade-offs, which I'm sure you're facing all the time as a board, I am begging you to not have a solar at all cost mentality. It is critical that this board represents and protects the people of the county that are relying on you. We need you to be specific and note the details and make decisions based on the facts of each particular location. If we're voting yes for every single solar site in every case and in every situation, then somebody's not doing their job. That is not feeling responsible, and it almost might border on negligent. I know that HB 4412 makes this all super difficult. I completely understand that our hands are tied, and we're in this bubble of time between the law being set and not quite being where it's going to end up, as we all anticipate. But we're asking you to be bold regarding the site in Union and take some risk related to the law. It seems like a much more palatable risk than having the worst scenario happen, which would be contaminating the groundwater and the people of Union, Illinois. If you decide to approve the risk, however, if you decide to approve this despite the risk, then we do ask, and I've got a handout that Mr. Bueller has for everyone to take away. We have several things that would make this less bad for everyone. The first one is for the county to provide ongoing water checking, and I don't mean the normal stuff. It needs to be much more robust than that. It's a sensitive aquifer area. It's high soil permeability. There needs to be ongoing testing of this water to protect the people. Second is the screening needs to be much better. These are 16-foot tall panels. Right now there's shrubs planned. We've got to have evergreens, and it's got to be around at least 3 sides of this area where people will see it. Also, there's a few perimeter trees left. They should not be impacted in any way. Third, the fencing does need to be fixed in the current proposal that's on the table because they're planning to add sheep. And the fencing does not go all the way to the ground right now. And it's got to do that. And there's published things about solar grazing sheep. It's got to go all the way to the ground with a tension bottom.
Summarize your comments, please.
In order to protect them from predators. There is also a pad that will have the inverter on it. If it could be moved about 100 feet, it will get out of the line of sight of homes. There's homes all around this property. And then finally, please take a look at those decommissioning costs. They're way too low based on the new data. And anyway, I'll wrap up there. Thank you for the time.
Terry Kappel, followed by Cindy Squirma.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Terry Kappel. I'm a Democratic Precinct Committeeman from McHenry 31. I'm coming here to talk about the gravel pit issue in McHenry. We held a city council meeting on Monday where over 300 people attended. It had to be moved to the high school because of the crowd expected. Since this site that was not annexed at the meeting on Monday is on county property, it potentially can become a county issue. And I am not a NIMBY advocate in general. However, since this site for some residents is going to be within 50 feet of their backyard, I think they do have a direct interest, and this site is planned to be across the street from a daycare, a church, nearby to a school, and within a residential area. I think that this county board should consider zoning for gravel pits that precludes it being very close to residential areas, particularly for new long-term residential areas where people have been living there for a long time. Some may have respiratory issues, and we know that silicate is a health issue and can result in many health problems, including cancer and problems with people with asthma. So I think the county board should keep in mind that these sites don't need to be in residential areas. There's plenty of places in McHenry County where they can be sited and affect fewer people. A second thing I want to talk about is since you're considering the budget, I would like you to not forget about the people in our county, thousands of people who would benefit from expanded route bus service. I've talked about this before. I've met people who have said that, people working at MCC who said that they've experienced students coming to them in tears because they can't get to the classes they want to get to for the opportunity to better themselves and become all that they are potentially able to be. There are people who want to get to doctor's appointments, to other appointments. They want to go and patronize our businesses in this county, and they're not able to do it because they don't have a dedicated route bus service that's dependable. Our current service is not, and
You could summarize, please.
and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Cindy? Followed by Nancy Schlugelt?
Good morning. I'm Dr. Cindy Skrukrud, S-K-R-U-K-R-U-D. I'm a 35-year resident of Solon Mills. I also chair the Defenders Water and Natural Resources Protection Action Team. I want to speak on the impact of solar farms on watersheds and water quality. I got started working on watershed issues in the 90s when I served as executive director of the Defenders for 6 years. I then spent 20 years as the Clean Water Program Director for the Illinois chapter of the Sierra Club until I retired in 2020. I'm trained as an agricultural biologist and a biochemist, so how to best maintain healthy watersheds was once new to me too. What I can tell you now is that green infrastructure, replicating how nature handles stormwater and snowmelt, is the best way to reduce flooding, clean up our water, and replenish our aquifers. Many towns in McHenry County are retrofitting their communities to provide more features that mimic nature, like stormwater basins planted with native plants. Bioswales also planted with native plants that carry, cleanse, and infiltrate stormwater. The reason towns have to do this is because they have covered so much of the ground with pavement and so have destroyed native prairies and wetlands that can soak up and store water. I recommend you visit tinyurl.com/FridayBMP tours to see videos of these practices. The county P&D department and the Defenders have sponsored these tours for the past 2 years so we can learn from one another about the BMP's best management practices being implemented here. Solar farms do not pave the land like development does, so they will not create the same flooding and water quality issues. But planting solar farms with low-profile native plants is also a BMP. These plants with their deep roots will capture and infiltrate water into the ground. This will help recharge our sand and gravel aquifer, our most important and replenishable source of drinking water. This will reduce flooding downstream, certainly better than a plowed field does. A solar farm with drought-tolerant native plants will also does not need to be irrigated during its lifetime, conserving groundwater for our drinking water. There will be no need to apply fertilizers that can run off and are responsible for algae blooms in area lakes and the Fox River. There will be no need for pesticides and little need for herbicides except during the critical first 5 years of the solar farm when it is important to control weeds while the prairie is getting established. Contrary to what you may have heard from others, solar farms planted with native plants are a BMP that provides a multitude of stacked benefits that should reduce flooding, improve water quality, recharge our aquifers, and create pollinator habitat throughout McHenry County, as well as providing a source of clean energy for our residents. Thank you.
Nancy, followed by Pat Dekoff.
Hi, I'm Nancy Sheetselt, 4419 Walkup Road, Crystal Lake. I'm part of the Environmental Defenders Solar Committee. I've spoken on behalf of the Defenders to many of you in the past about adopting solar energy in our county. And I'm here to praise those of you who started working on this issue about 5 or 6 years ago. As you know, our state is seen as a leader in our country in moving away from fossil fuels to clean energy. And our county, due to many of you, is seen as a leader in our state in moving toward clean energy as well. That allows us to help in the effort to protect future generations from the effects that we're already seeing from global climate change. I don't have grandchildren, but I know that many of you do, and I'm sure that you want the best for them during their lives in the future. I grew up on a farm, and thus my heart is still with farming families. Allowing them to rent portions of their land for solar farms may make a big difference in their lives. It may mean that one of their children will be able to stay on the farm, build a family, and farm with their parents because of that rent money coming in. That would have been a godsend to my family when I was growing up. It may also mean that farmers will not be led to sell some of their land to developers just to stay solvent. Thus, that will help prevent the subdivisions that require more streets, more schools, more fire departments, et cetera, from spreading across our county. And as you know, these solar farms only take the land out of production for a relatively short period of time of 25 to 30 years. That land then can be returned to farming actually in better shape than it was before, since it will not have had herbicides completely spread over it. There will be some spot herbiciding of natives, but there will not have been herbicides spread over it during that 25 to 30 years. The soil will not have been compacted during that time by multiple tractor trips across the field, and it will be enriched by the prairie plants that will have been growing there during those years. And happily, according to the Illinois Environmental Council, the new law still will allow us to keep our pollinator planting policy just exactly as it is now. And of course, solar panels do not increase the temperature above them. In fact, they would be terribly inefficient if they did. They are specifically made to absorb the sun's rays and heat and not to reflect it. So I think it would be so sad if you deny the permits before you next week and end up getting the county sued and thus costing our residents a lot of money. So I urge you to continue to support solar energy in our county as you have in the past. Let us continue to be a leader. Thank you.
Pat Dekoff, followed by Timothy Sebastian.
Hello, my name is Pat Dekoff. I live at 967 Barlina Road, Crystal Lake. My husband and I have lived in McHenry County over 54 years, hard to believe. We put solar on our home in 2014 and then added more panels in January of this year when we started charging our hybrid electric car. Our electric bill last month was $9.32. We have no damage to the panels from hail or other weather conditions. Zillow recent research showed that adding a solar system to a home increases its value 4 to 10%. It's a win-win-win situation, decrease our electric bill, increase the value of a home, and help reduce climate change's effects. Actually, I spoke to the county board approximately 5 years ago on today's topic, community solar farms. Only about 1/4 of utility customers can take advantage of solar at their location. For many reasons, they're not able to access this renewable energy resource. They have too much shade, don't have enough space, don't own their own residence or building, or they can't afford the initial cost of the installation. By subscribing to community solar, they will see a 10 to 20% reduction in their electric bill. Churches and other nonprofits, government entities, and businesses can also take advantage of these same reduced costs from solar. My church has applied for community solar with a company that we contacted after seeing their profile on Community Solar Citizens Utility Board comparison chart. We're currently on their waiting list, and we're looking forward to saving money on our church's electric bill and reducing our impact on the earth. Subscribing to community solar is a clean energy answer for many. Illinois is making progress of their goal of 25% renewable energy use by 2025, but has a long way to go. Also, by Illinois making this transformation to clean energy, it will improve the power grid's reliability, and by adding solar power to the grid, lessen the need for expensive power plants, lowering market prices for all. We all are seeing the results of climate disruption around the world and specifically in our county through increased flooding and disruptive weather events. This all takes a toll on our economy and our future. And speaking of our future, I have a picture of my husband and my granddaughter in front of our solar panels. And it reminds us every day, this is what her future is planning on. Please keep this in mind when you consider community solar proposals. Thank you very much.
Timothy Sebastian, followed by Lisa Haderline.
Hi, Tim's not going to be speaking. My name's Lisa Haderline. I'm the Executive Director of the Land Conservancy of McHenry County, and I had provided a letter to Mr. Bueller yesterday from the Land Conservancy. First, I want to say I feel like I'm in a very awkward position right now because we're very much in support of a transition to renewable energies in the world. And in fact, because a lot of our work that we do is to build resilience in McHenry County for managing what's coming and what's already here in terms of climate change. But what I did want to make sure the county board is aware of is when in regard to Wildcat Solar 1 and 2 proposals on Route 120 and Fleming Road, there is a conservation easement on that property that the Land Conservancy has held since 2007. It was given to us by, donated to us by Ms. Josephine Elson, who is the descendant of John Finch, who was the original farmer on the property, and she wanted to preserve that farmland for farming forever. We have consulted legal advice and have looked very closely at within the, as the lawyers like to say, within the four corners of the easement document to see if there would be an opportunity to amend the document as written to allow for the construction of solar on it. And on Monday night, our board voted to deny a request to make an amendment. They felt that it is not, it would not be consistent with the intent or with the language of the existing easement. So we would ask that the county board not approve those two proposals. Thank you.
John Carson, followed by Edward Gogol.
Thank you for your time this morning. I'm John Carson. I'm the managing partner of Trajectory Energy Partners. I know you have a lot of different solar projects in front of you, so I just want to take a brief minute to tell you about the project we are developing here in McHenry County, Plowshare Solar. First of all, a little bit about our company. We're an Illinois-based company. We have employees around the state. We've worked on projects around the state. I live in Lake County. Abby Witt, our Director of External Affairs, is a resident of McHenry County, and we're proud to be bringing our first project here to the county. We dropped off packets in a folder that looked like this for everyone last week. This project, Plowshare Solar, is a community solar project, so it's smaller in size. It's not a utility scale project, and importantly, it's part of a new program in Illinois called Community-Driven Community Solar. That means this project will be bringing extra benefits to the residents of Riley Township and McHenry County. Project will have a actually higher savings rate for subscribers to the project, and because of our partnership with McHenry County Environmental Defenders, we'll be making a donation donation as part of the project to renewable energy and energy efficiency projects in Riley Township. We've also made a commitment that this project will bring local union jobs. We will partner with the building trades to have the project built. Just again, a quick reminder of where this project is. So as one of our neighbors and supporters mentioned, it's right in Riley Township, just north of the interstate. The Ozinga gravel mines that are right there are expanding and will be right across the road. We are outside of the area that the city of Marengo has annexed. Where our project is, there are no planned utility lines, but if the city of Marengo ever wanted to work with us, we'd be happy to work with them in our setback areas. But as it stands, City of Marengo has zoned all of that for industrial. The gravel mine will be to the north, so ultimately this will be one of the few open areas left. I also wanted to mention the extensive community engagement that we did for this project. We knocked on all the doors in the area. We sent our own letters in addition to what the county did. We held an open house. We met with township officials. In fact, after a meeting with the township road commissioner, made an adjustment to our plan to accommodate some of their concerns about which of the county or township road we should have our entrance on. So hopefully that gives you a little background distinguishing this project from others. I'm proud that we've had some supporters for our project here today. And I finally just want to recognize the tough position you are in as a county, but commend you on some of the things you included in your April update to your zoning laws. We've done work in over 30 counties and cities across the state, and I thought your ordinance that you've recently updated is quite thoughtful. You have a very extensive building permit process, and thank you for your time.
Edward Gogol, followed by Maria Liebrandt.
Hi, my name is Ed Gogol. I live in Crystal Lake. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. When I look at a solar farm, I see something that is protecting the groundwater. I see something that is going to be improving the soil. I see something that is making tax revenue for local communities, local jobs, income for the owner of the property. It's an absolute win-win. Their panels, they sit there quietly, just generating electricity, harvesting energy from the sun. I can't speak to any particular location that you're considering, the advisability, but I urge you all to vote for. We need solar. McHenry County needs to be a leader, not a resistor in the future. I would also urge you to take a look at what we can do as a county and a state, for that matter, to incentivize or require putting solar panels on existing big boxes, whether they're factories, warehouses, or stores. Put them on top of big boxes. Nobody cares. They're out of sight, out of mind. Please, we desperately need solar development. We desperately need renewable energy. Look at all the news that's coming around the world every single day. Our grandkids, I'm a mere 70 years old. I'll be gone before the worst of the horrible climate change happens. It wouldn't be surprising if one of these days we wake up and we hear that Florida is flooded. Thank you.
Maria Liebrandt, followed by Susan Lemus.
Hi, good morning, Maria Liebrandt. I'm against the Ocock Road parcel. I don't think that people really realize what they're supporting. I don't believe that they realize that in Union, we get warnings on our water already. If you're elderly, if you have cancer, if you have infants, don't drink the water. There's warnings on it because it's not healthy. Guess what? It's going to be leaching from solar farms. It's going to make it even more unhealthy. I do not want this in our town because we're a small farming town. We're a hardworking town. And it's proven that over studies what happens to people that live within, let's see here, 1.5 miles away, you lose 1.7% of your property value. And if you live 5 to 7 miles away, or I'm sorry, if you live under a 10th mile away, it's 5 to 7% of your property value. So if basically Union, we have about $300,000 homes. There's about 300 homes. So you're going to take out of our town if an average, just an average of 10,000, say, because it's actually between 5,100 and 21,000 per home we'll lose. If you lose an average of 10,000 per home, that's $3.25 million out of Union. We can't take that hit in Union. We're barely making it right now. Everybody's barely making it. I don't know what you guys are thinking as far as the tyrannical laws the government's trying to pass. Please don't listen to them. Listen to the people that you vote with you, that are your neighbors, that care for our country. I care about solar, but I also know I've driven all over the U.S., and there's plenty of open land. I can see the solar farm where it says McHenry County. That's how close it is to our property. That's how close it is to many of these properties that we all live by. There's just a lot of open land. Please don't do this around a residential tourist area. The Illinois Railway Museum is opposed to it. It's going to ruin their property, their tourism. It's going to ruin that for them, too. There's a lot more besides that I don't think that people really understand. I don't want to make this into, I don't want solar. I do want solar. I just know that there's millions of open miles all over Illinois. I've traveled for travel baseball with my son everywhere. Trust me, I've seen them. There's lots of places to put it. You don't need to put it in people's backyards. It shouldn't be where there's people already having issues with their water. We know this is going to be more issues with our water. We really are objecting to this, and I'm speaking for hundreds of people in the town. They have told me they speak on this. They also have said they want to know how the decommissioning is going to be done because AMP Energy is owned by a Canadian company. They're not going to give us the discounts. We're not going to benefit in Illinois from it. It's a $31,000 tax credit, but it's going to take out $3.25 million from Union's value. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't, not even in the long run. To do it for a small town, you're going to decimate our small towns, not just Union, Marengo, Woodstock, McHenry County, all over. I beg you, do not follow tyrannical laws. I beg you, I'm from a military family. My family fought for freedom, not for tyrannical laws. This is something I feel that is so wrong. I've worked my life to have my property. So for someone to take 7,000, or it's going to be 7% value, I'll be hit by it. It's $20,000 away from me. It's $20,000 away from all my neighbors that are here, minimum. And not to mention our water. I know I need to stop my comments. Feel my heart, please.
Susan Lemus.
My name is Susan Lenius. I live on Oak Road. Really, I have to agree with everything against the solar, needless to say. I mean, my husband and I moved out to the country for the free water, free land. I understand, you know, that we need this green land. How are we going to raise people and farm animals if we don't have the farmland? Our population is growing by leaps and bounds, which means we're going to need more food for people and for animals. How are you going to support these people if you don't have the green farmland? Please reevaluate all of the destruction of the precious agricultural land and properties that these solar panels are going to do. I mean, I'm not against totally against the solar problems because we're going to need the solar panels. But there are so many flat buildings in the towns and counties. Can't you put them on the buildings? Please, think about this. You know, if you're going to vote for it, please consider all the objections and all the possibilities, other possibilities besides the land. There's locations in this county that have derelict land on them. It's unusable. Why not go there? This land on Union Road is very productive. Don't destroy it, please. I implore you to look everything over and reconsider. Thank you.
Okay, that was all the public comments that had checked to speak. Did I miss anybody? Ma'am, come up.
Sorry, I did it wrong. Morning. My name is Jessica Beverly. I live at 13613 West Jackson Street in Woodstock. I don't usually make public comment on the record regarding my personal feelings, but I am generally supportive of solar in our county. Change is hard, and the county has been through this before with cell towers. Well, I wasn't around here for that debate. Many of the arguments are similar, and they're ubiquitous in the county now. Much the same as cell towers, solar farms are guaranteed income for farmland owners. In addition, counties, townships, and school districts will receive substantially increased taxes with no increase on the population, ongoing construction traffic. Solar farms are completed within 6 to 12 months. There's occasional mowing. There's nothing else that's going to be put there for 40 years. Many of these projects are located near main drags and main roads. They're within municipal annexation areas. It should be expected by neighbors that we would see housing developments, industrial developments around there. If a solar farm is there, you're going to have the quietest neighbor for 40 years. That said, not every project is a great project, and as folks have testified at the zoning board hearings, many of these projects will die on the vine regardless. Many of these developers will have to go, well, every developer will have to go through our building permitting process. They're going to have to get recs from the state. They're going to have to get easements. If they don't have their easements organized, it's dead on the vine. Our ordinance provides for decommissioning boundary evaluations every 10 years. It's already there. We've amended our ordinance to be consistent with the state law in a way that maintains that we can control for what we can. We have a very good ordinance. I recommend that we follow our ordinance and that we stick to what we have on the books. Thank you very much.
If you could state your name, please.
I'm Gina Lefevre. I'm talking on behalf of Seneca Township and the Old Cock Road. So my first thing is, why are you here if the state's going to override anything you want to decide on? I just don't get that. Then the real question is, why am I here? It's because 100 people showed up at the Seneca Township meeting, so I'm talking on behalf of them. And also, I don't think your zoning board did you any favors. You know, really, there's so much proof and information about why we are against solar on Ocock Road. It has a place in the world. We're not there yet, but they didn't do you any favors, and you can say no, and you can stand by your words. So here's the facts. Farmland is 60% of McHenry County. The income is $186 million. It comprises of 2,500 families. So let's translate that into more money. They are the local economy. These people dine here, their schools are here, their churches are here. They support the local economy. Illinois is #1 in soybean production and produces 16% of the United States total, just in Illinois alone. So here's the deal. We have the best soil in the world, some of the best soil in the world in McHenry County. Think about that. So once that farmland is gone, no matter what they say about, you know, the plants and all that, bottom line is this: they haven't decommissioned, and when they do, those panels shatter into bazillions of pieces and cannot replace the farmland. So that is just not the truth. Not to mention, most of these companies will be bankrupt. They've already abandoned many fields of antiquated equipment. And the board members here that are from Hebron, Harvard, Marengo, Woodstock, Union, you should be screaming at the top of your lungs to protect farmland. And I'll tell you why. Agritourism. You talk about the money pouring into this area right now. Think about it. You've got the apple orchards, the farmers market, Cody's, the county fair, All Seasons Farm, the Train Museum, Prairie North, Autumn Drive, Van Bergen's, Royal Oaks. This is thousands of people coming into this area. Again, translate that into money. We're talking millions of dollars that are coming into the county because of agritourism. And these businesses are established. We've been here for 30 years, all these different companies, where these new companies, these solar ones, they're temporary. Their employees are temporary. The companies aren't even from around here. So let's think about that. The real question is, why here? Really think about it. Why here? Write this down. We have 96 total clear days in the state of Illinois. 96. So why would we have a solar panel in a place that hasn't had a lot of sun? It is also, we are ranked 36 out of 50 states as being solar effectiveness. So is there a place for it? Yes, but let's think about where it should be. So truly, I feel this is irresponsible and negligent to not put much harder restrictions on all this. I get it. So you must say no. You have to think about saying no. and really be leaders, fight for our county, take the risk. These companies have 30 other requests already, as you know, and hundreds across the country. They don't care about Ocock Road. It's just one of many. So your paths are paved, but our children's and our grandchildren's are what your repercussions will leave. Thank you.
Okay, that's all we have for public comment today. We'll move on to our budget update presented by Peter Austin, our county administrator, and Carrie Wise, our CFO. Oh, and by the way, our speaker that left the handout for the board members, I'll leave that on the corner of my desk here today. If you want to pick it up on your way out, feel free.
Well, good morning. We had some important public comment. We're a little bit behind where we thought we'd be on the schedule, so I don't want to take up too much time. But this is also an important little presentation that we want to put together. You know, our organization kind of has a tradition now. We've been doing a number of years in August, kind of coming to the county board and talking about the budget development process and where we are. And kind of, you know, we like to kind of present what are the challenges? What are we seeing? And I think Carrie's going to do a good job of kind of talking you through that today. I don't want you to have an expectation that we're going to have all the answers today. And so just spoiler alert, we don't have all the solutions yet. but we do want to talk about some of the things that we're seeing. And then as we move into September, kind of we'll be crafting some of those paths around the obstacles that we're seeing. You know, Carrie, in her new role as CFO, has given me a lot of confidence because she has been the woman behind the scenes on the budget for a half dozen years. So I know that this is going to go well. but it's a new role for her to be out front. Jeremy Andrzejkowski, Jeremy Andrzejkowski is our new assistant finance director, and he's going to be kind of developing the budgets in the future years. But right now, he's kind of working with Carrie, and we're just so glad you're here, Jeremy. And I know, Carrie, you're going to walk us through this. I'm really going to be stepping back here and letting you do the thing. I'll chime in as I feel like I need to, but this is I think a nice presentation. Kathy made the PowerPoint. It's pretty slick looking. We will send this out afterwards, so you guys all have a copy, but there's not a ton of data in it, so it's just more pictures to kind of guide the discussion. So, Carrie?
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning. So we're just going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that we're facing while we're building this budget. And we're still working with the departments. They're still coming to your committee, so this is very much a work in process. But we just wanted to go over some of the kind of high-level environmental factors that we're dealing with. So I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. You know, if you have any questions along the way, just let me know.
Just yell.
Yes. So our first challenge is really a continuation of what we've been seeing. I think everyone's been seeing it in their personal budgets, in their business budgets, is the impact of inflation. And so it is getting better, but this year we're dealing with about a 3% inflation rate. So what exactly does that mean for our budget, which this graph shows that what would have cost us $263 million is now costing us $271 million as we're building our '24 budget. A big impact for us is salaries and benefits, but it also impacts our commodities, including our vehicles, and some of our services, specifically the inmate food and health care costs. Okay. The next challenge is the Safety Act, which the body cameras went into effect on January 1st of '23, but the pretrial fairness will not be in effect until this September. So we've been talking about this for a couple years now, and we have a lot of unknowns, and we continue to work with the departments
as they prepare. We don't want to just jump straight to worst-case scenario, but we do need to anticipate some additional spending. So in '23, we actually budgeted for the body cameras. So a big cost of that is the video storage, and then the people to maintain that video storage and the evidence. And then new in fiscal '24, we're anticipating more body cameras and more in-car cameras. And then one FTE, which the state's attorney is requesting in response to the Pretrial Fairness Act, one additional attorney.
And we're still learning. I read the slide and Carrie put it together. Hey, didn't we already pay for this? Yes, we did. But we're reminded that there was additional costs. There was additional, as we got smarter and more aware of what our real costs are going to be, we've kind of folded more into next year. And who knows what the year beyond that, Kelly?
Yeah. So
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I got you.
I'm sitting back here. I know that there's grants. In the past, I've been in grants from the state and I think federal also for body cams. I'm wondering, I know I've asked this question in finance, have you guys looked into applying for grants to help offset those costs?
We have not. So right now, they're being paid through ARPA, but I think a lot of this presentation is not only talking about, what we experienced last year that's rolling into '24, budgeting for '24, but then '25 and then '26 when our ARPA money runs out. So maybe at the end of that, there would be an opportunity for additional grants.
We always look for grants, but there's really nothing particularly unique about us in our body camera experience. All governments in Illinois are dealing with this, whether they already have or will be in the next couple of years.
I just know of a municipality here in the county who, a few years ago when they started their program, was able to offset almost 100% of their costs with a grant. So just something to keep in mind for the future.
Thanks.
Okay, next. This actually sometimes is my biggest concern. And again, it's more talking about how we're moving forward. And our increased software and licensing expenses, just continue to grow. And I listed just a few of the very expensive ones here, but we have lots of departments with many different software programs. And so I know one thing for me, what I want to focus on moving forward is, we have the expense for these programs, but how do we use these programs to, become more efficient, more productive?
Transparent.
Yes, but initially, we have these expenses. And then also, for the first time in several years, I think all of our plans have an increase on the employer contribution for healthcare. I think in the past, it's just been the HMO.
This is my favorite slide.
Okay, so we're on the first bullet point, we talked a little bit about specific levies that we that we're always kind of looking at. But I think before we talk about each levy, we need to talk about the aggregate. So what this slide shows is the past 11 years of what we've levied.
The total levy.
Yes. And you'll see that, how it's broken out into the levies in the next slide. So the 22, we levied 71.5 million. And so under PTEL rules, next year, that can be our base.
And when we say 22, that means this year's levy.
Budget 23,
the dollars that are
tax year
collected
22,
this year,
yes.
Right.
A 5% CPI plus new growth would put us with an increase of around 4.1 million. So that would be the maximum that we could take under PTEL. So just kind of for some perspective, if you look at 2014, that is the highest in the past 11 years, so which is 79.4 million. So if you think about inflation, salary increases, everything, we'd still be levying significantly less if we took the max.
This county board and previous county boards have just done a great job of holding the line on this levy. And when you think about the most we could possibly get this year is about $75.5 million, and compare that to 2012, that's $78.5 million. You guys are all to be commended. You've done a great job. we're going to try and hold the line on that for sure. But I just want to put it all in perspective. Lou?
So my question is, if we had more money in 2012 than we do in 2022, what didn't get funded in 2022? Who didn't get money that they needed?
There's several answers to that. You know, we have a lot less staff today than we did in 2014. Maybe 150 fewer staff members. And that's goes to Carrie's comment about technology and how we're using technology to increase efficiency. We also had a lot more strength in our funds in 2014. Up and down the line, and we'll talk about funds in a moment, up and down the line, our funds were stronger ahead, and maybe in some instances, excess reserves that didn't even need to be there. And we talked at Administrative Services a couple weeks ago about the strength in that tort fund that doesn't exist anymore and how we need to replenish it. But you know, we haven't seen a growth in some of our levies, and whether that be their senior service levy or our mental health levy or some of the other, we haven't seen a growth there. Because the priority for much of the last decade has been to hold the line as much as we can on the overall levies.
Okay, so next, this one's static, but I do have an interactive worksheet. So this is just to kind of show.
Wait, get over here.
Sorry. I know I'm not that loud. This is just to kind of show how we, as Pete talked about, each year it's looking at the aggregate, but then which fund needs what based on their fund balance, their expenses, or whatever. So this worksheet really shows, so if you look here, here's our starting point plus new growth. So it shows us if you add any percentage of the CPI. So let's 5% to go with our example. This becomes our new levy. So that levy is our total piece of the pie. And then we have to come up with how that gets divided among these 11 individual funds. So if one levy needs more, then it has to come from another one. And so we're constantly trying to manage that, starting based on the total, and then, like I said, based on what the funds need. So just in this, I have the general fund always kind of being the variance, but if.
Can you blow that up at all? Because we can't even see that.
It's very pretty and green, but can't read it.
We'll do it section by section. How's that?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
All right, how's that? Is that better? So this top section, this is what I was talking about. This is how we start with the total aggregate. So the CPI, right now I have it as 5%, but if we do 2.5, and we'll go into this more in our September Cal meeting when we talk about the scenarios that we had in the budget policy. But we would say that. So then this 2.5 CPI, our levy becomes 73 million. And then that number, gets spread to these separate levies. So I know we're going to talk about VAC in a little bit. If this one goes up, then the general fund has to go down. Well, that's how I have it in this model. IMRF may have some room to move, or it's kind of a bunch of moving pieces based on multiple different factors. So I just wanted to kind of, we're not going to go into it in too much detail, but just to kind of give you an idea.
They all fold together. I said it's kind of like a water bed. If you push here, it goes up here, and vice versa.
Yes.
And how much new money, if any, is allowed to go into the levy, we'll be working with those options for you in September. But just know it all folds together. We've had a lot of discussion already this summer about the mental health board and their request for some additional dollars. But just understanding that we're only going to have, at the very most, about $4 million in new money. So,
if we take the max.
If we, at the very most, and that is not the suggestion. That is not the suggestion. We're going to try and minimize that, but we just want to give you guys all the information and all the tools.
So one of the things, every single year, these levies and the levy rates get adjusted up or down based on the needs of the particular levy that we're looking at. And so they get adjusted based on total dollars. And so the dollars equate to the rate that was charged. But every year, we're always tweaking those rates just slightly, depending on what the needs are for particular funds that we're all trying to accomplish. And I'll use the highway fund as, a good example. So, last year that was a fund that was pretty much in the red, and the board made a decision to use general fund dollars and give that fund $3 million to try and get it out of the red. It doesn't have the approved, so we have a
We have a slide for that.
oh, do you? Oh, well then I'll stop talking. Never mind, sorry.
Ms. Greeno?
Do you have a model that you'll be showing us about the mandatory increases such as, the contribution toward healthcare benefits, the IMRF funds, so that we can see what's the actual baseline that we will have to increase because it's required by policy or law?
Yeah, well, we're going to walk through some of the next step here is we're going to walk through some of the funds that we are kind of saying we know need to increase. Right. And we will be having kind of some more discussion with Finance Committee as we move into September about where's the must-haves, and then the others will kind of fall out of there.
Okay, so we're just going to focus in on these 5 levies specifically, but as you just saw, there's 11 that we have to consider, but these are the ones that we've been kind of watching and will probably need some movement. So starting with Mental Health Board. So this one, and I'm sorry, I will make a note when I send this out. We don't have the official sign-off on our FY22 numbers, so these are still unaudited, but we're just finishing the report, so I think these will be the final numbers. But I'll put an asterisk. So this is where they ended fiscal year 22, which makes that 8.72 months of reserve. So in terms of what that means in dollars, so that's an excess reserve of 3.1. But also something to consider is they have a utilization of fund balance of $900,000 in this year's budget. So that number may come down slightly, but it's just, just kind of back to my point of, they're constantly moving, but these are the things we kind of look at least to start the process.
So there is a fair amount of reserve in this fund, but again, that's a one-time
Yes.
answer. And I think it is reasonable to consider some increase in the mental health levy.
Thank you. So I was just wondering, out of that reserve, do you know how much has already been granted but not given out yet?
So this is unrestricted reserve amount. So if they have it in a restricted amount, it's not included in this.
Okay.
So
And
most of it's available.
Yes.
do you know, do they have a specific line item that says restricted?
I will get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
So the next one, there's been some discussion about senior services, increasing this levy. So, we just put it on here because this is one that we want to keep in the conversation about increasing. It's been at the 1.645.
Since the inception of the levy.
Yeah, it's.
Chairman Bueller kind of called us together this week to talk with Pam Altoff and Tracy Von Bergen and us, about what's the history of this levy and what can we do? So if we bumped it by an additional 350,000, we'd get near to the 2 million, and that would certainly still be less than when you account for inflation. It would be less than it was worth when it started, but at least it would make some progress towards some real needs there in the senior service arena.
Pam has a question.
And as you do that, why this came up, again, we have never increased this in over 20 years. This was a community initiative to engage in this tax for seniors. And this year alone, we received 23 applications, access to these funds that were over $1 million more than we have. And let me remind you, my little statistics here, I'm advocating. 1/3 of McHenry County's population is over the age of 50. We're aging. This is important. So thank you for the consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the next one is our VAC fund. This one is one it's similar to highway where a couple years ago, we were noticing that the levy was not high enough to keep it at the 5-month reserve. And I guess the note I have on this one is we have funded everything that the superintendent has requested.
They've never gone without.
Yes, but it's more so just one of the ones that's below 5 months, so it's kind of anticipating any future needs they might have. This one needs to be a little bit higher than it was last year to get it up to at least the 5 months. Okay, liability. This is the risk fund. So there's a couple things. Like I know this is showing at the end of 22, they were over their 6 months or their 5 months of reserve. But if you know from Scott's wonderful model, we saw their fund balance very high and it's been coming down. And so they've actually budgeted to use $786,000 in their 23 budget of their fund balance. So I think as it's coming down, we're kind of finding the place where it needs to be. But now that we've kind of seen it level off, we've found the spot where we think the levy needs to be, and that's why we're focusing on the ones that need an increase.
Right, and the budget that was presented to Administrative Services suggests a $750,000 increase in the levy to get to where the model suggests it should be. Now, it doesn't have to be 750. We can, as we said, we can cross our fingers and we can, we're steering a battleship here, so we have time to adjust. So we could do something less than 750, but we probably should do some increase.
Yes, and this was a levy that we, I think, leaned on maybe a little too much as when we were talking earlier about how did we make those reductions happen from 12 until where we are now.
Now to Member Scala's comment on the highway fund.
The highway fund. Okay, so as you can see here, they ended fiscal year 22 with a $2.8 million fund balance. And if you remember, right at the end of 22, we did do that transfer from the general fund of $3 million. So it would have, without that, they would have been their third year in a row of being negative. And so, the transfer of $3 million plus an increased levy to get them back to where they need to be. And I think based on the budget policy and the increase in their capital equipment, we need to continue to look at what this levy needs to be at to keep them healthy moving forward.
You're looking at me. You want me to...
Did that answer your point?
Well, no, that was my point. My point is that without that $3 million, that fund would have been negative again. And so just for full board's information, this is the fund that the Transportation Department pays the salaries and the actual working fund of that department. So they were using, prior to this event, they were using their other funds in order to cover as a short-term, interfund loan, I guess you want to call it that, in order to make this work. The concern is trying to maintain that health. And so the board last year made a commitment to increase that levy amount in order to try and maintain, give it the one-time cash infusion to get it healthy again, but then also put the levy at a point where it's trying to be maintained. And I do believe that we do need to increase that levy slightly in order to keep that health, because again, it's just going to, if we maintain it where it's currently at, it's going to continue to erode away, and it still won't meet policy. So I think we do need to increase that slightly, outside of the capital program, but, just for salaries and everything else.
Okay, next steps. So this I kind of feel is just a really small glimpse into kind of our big puzzle. So as we continue and finalize with the departments, we will have all that pulled together for finance and audit on September 7th. And then we have a special committee of the whole on September 28th where we'll have everything. And then you can see the revenue versus the expenses and the whole picture in order, to make the decision.
We're strong on the general fund, and I'm really feeling good about that. And we did review revenues with Finance Committee last week, and I think Carrie's done a good job of giving some projections there, and we'll do that again in September. But it's these other funds, some of these smaller tangential funds that probably do need a little bit of shoring up this budget year.
Ms. Van Hoff?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, both Peter and Carrie, for that report. I really appreciate looking at the previous years and what happened there. I just have a question about, a couple of things. I know we changed from ADP to Kronos, 5, 6 years ago, however long ago that was.
2 years Seems like
it was only 2 years ago. So my question is, when we make a change like this, because that was a big ticket item, I just think I remember seeing that it was $336 million per year that we paid.
$1,000.
I'm sorry, yeah. $336,000. So how did that compare to ADP? And then have we had enough time to assess that change and to determine whether this was a good change or not?
So I think the comment on ADP was we were on a version of ADP from, I believe it was the 80s.
We were very vulnerable.
Yes. And so it wasn't so much a question of switching, to get, I guess you do switch to get the benefit of the new technology, but we were on I think it was, the server was here on site, and it was old and vulnerable.
We looked at many options, but all the options would have cost more. Kronos cost more than we were spending before. ADP, the new version of ADP would have cost more, or some other competitor. We had to make a change. I think we're pretty satisfied with Kronos. It's providing a wonderful tool for our employees. The access and at home on your phone, to all of your payroll stuff, it's pretty awesome.
So,
but it's not really a budget issue because they all would have been expensive.
Yeah.
I know, and so I guess my question really was it a good change for benefits as far as?
For me, as an employee, I love it.
You love it, okay, cool. And then the other thing, when I know we increased the budget to accommodate things like the Safety Act, administrative cost and employee cost, and also attorneys and that. So, and it may be that we overshot that. Will we be able to come back and look at that? Because my experience with putting things in the budget is that sometimes departments feel like they have to use it. They have to use it up or they're going to lose it next. So I'm just curious about what the oversight is for evaluating this and determining that maybe we don't need to add a half a dozen attorneys. Maybe we only need 3, for instance. Or same thing with administrative costs involved in the body cams and so forth and so on. So is there some oversight there to make?
We have a wonderful team, and remember there's lots of layers to safety. The most recent item that we've been talking about is the pretrial fairness. We know that's going to go into place now in September, but we already had video cameras, as you said. We've already had training. We've already had mandatory de-escalation techniques and all these things that have been in place. We've got a lot of them factored into the budget right now. They're already there, baked in the cake. But now we're kind of figuring out what's really going to happen. The biggest thing that was different, that was going to be different this year, was the no cash bail or the pretrial fairness. And remember, that was going to go into effect January 1. We were ready to go. We were ready to go. And then we were going to say, we're going to reconvene 3 or 4 months later and see how it's really happening. Well, now it's really going to happen on September 18th. And I've been very, very impressed with Chief Judge Camille and his leadership in bringing everybody together and making us think through the most efficient decisions and ways to operate. And I know that's going to continue. So I'm confident that if this goes into effect September 18th, we're going to be reconvening around the first of the year and saying what's really working and what isn't. He's already made a commitment to getting together 2 weeks after the start. So October 4th, the meeting's already set. He's going to be bringing together all the police chiefs, all of the members of the criminal justice community, and to talk about, we're 2 weeks in, how is this working? What changes do we need to make?
Okay.
We got a good team.
Thank you.
Mr. Scala?
I don't,
Ms. Ness?
So, I always look at budgets as a department or an organization's best hope for the future years. And then we look at the revenue side and we start to downsize those ideas or those. I'm curious about, as we start to shape this and move this toward, a balanced revenue expense budget, what will people eliminate? What won't happen as a result of increasing or funding some of these levies up? Because I know that when we talk about seniors or veterans we're talking services to people. And so is there a way for us to know what won't happen if they don't get that money?
I think only in general.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really early. It's too early for us to say, what is an appropriate recommendation, or if we can do the budget with X, but you can do X plus, and this is what that plus will mean. I think that's kind of where we're wanting to position this discussion as we move into the end of September.
Okay.
Is that we know this is the core. This is what we need to operate in fiscal 24. But if you would like some additional services, then we'll kind of frame it for that.
Well, and I know that we're looking at numbers, but I know on the other side of these numbers are human beings, and whether they're your staff and salaries or whether they're countywide, I really get the seriousness of the deliberations that we're going to be making on this year's budget. So I want to know the impact to the people that won't get what they want. But thank you.
Mr. Kearns?
On our figures on that levy idea, the new growth those don't have the new growth in them possible. And do you have a projection of what your thoughts for 23? Do we know what our new growth exactly was for 23?
No, we don't know exactly, but we know with some sharpness that, and we've asked Bob Ross to update this, but he had earlier projected about $90 million of new AAV, which I think came.
That's what's up on the model.
And that resulted in about $500,000 in new revenue for the county.
Okay.
But that number, I think, will change before our final discussion.
And it's probably going up.
Yes.
But again, but you go up another 10 million in EAV, it doesn't spin off into a lot of new revenue.
No, but it's important that we do talk about that because historically we've taken that new growth.
And there has been the last couple of years.
Ms. Greeno?
Ms. Ness's comments brought to mind the rising tide lifts all boat and the public sector does not create wealth. Have we looked at the impact of the tax increase and what revenue that will take out of the pocket of taxpayers and how that would impact the growth of our economy? I mean, Scott's really good at models. And when people have money in their pockets and they spend it, it has a big impact on our local economy. And I think that would be a good thing to look at when we're thinking about the benefit of the people that live in McHenry County.
Thank you.
Ms. Wagner?
Thank you. For those new board members who haven't been through this exercise, one thing that really helped us last year was the different models that they gave us. And then they would state, okay, if you only took this much of a levy, then these are the things that we could fund. Or if you didn't take this part of the levy, these are the things we couldn't fund. So that would be projects or maybe employees. We wouldn't be able to hire a certain employee, but it really helped us visualize what we could or couldn't do. And I think you guys are planning to do that again this year, and I really applaud that because it shows us how we are funding the county or how we are not able to fund. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Carrie.
Please call us if you've got questions. Hey, come on, Carrie.
That was just like you.
Next, we have a presentation on wetland mitigation credit process. Mr. Kropalski will introduce our presenters.
While Greg is pulling up the presentation, just wanted to give a brief introduction, and you're wondering probably why are we on a committee of the whole for wetland mitigation. As you may recall at your July 18th county board meeting, this board did approve a resolution that authorized funding for the purchase of wetland credits for our Randall Road reconstruction project. This resolution authorized the payment of up to, or not to exceed, $2 million for these wetland credits for this year. At committee, there was a robust, and I'll emphasize, underline, I see Mr. Reinert smiling with that, there was a robust discussion on this, and we were asked to come and give a brief presentation here. We will keep it brief, or at least that's what I've been told. But I do want to recognize, too, that our partners with this, after committee, we were asked as the DOT, Assistant County Engineer Daryl Kuntz reached out to the Conservation District, who are just great partners with us. We appreciate everything that Elizabeth, Ed, and Gabe do in working with the Division of Transportation. And they wholeheartedly agreed to jump in quickly for this presentation, as they are the experts with it. We'll tell you about the process. The end goal is they will be the ones to implement it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Assistant County Engineer Daryl Kuntz.
Actually, I'm going to jump in here real
Sorry,
quickly.
Elizabeth.
That's okay. Good morning, everyone. You've had a full morning, and what we're here to talk about is intergovernmental collaboration and cooperation. You've been working through the budget, and I think what you're going to hear about today is not only the impact of sharing of resources and working together smartly versus harder, and using that synergy. You also heard a lot about groundwater recharge and in protecting our environment for not only current but future generations, and looking at projects. And I just want to highlight the county and Department of Transportation has been amazing partners. We worked together on prior mitigation bank work. We've worked together on different trails that have come into the county, on transportation areas, land use, and so we're here to work collaboratively. And I'm going to leave it to two of our team members here to speak on behalf of the district, and that two colleagues, Director of Land Preservation and Natural Resources, Ed Collins, and then our Conservation Ecology Manager, Gabe Powers. Darryl, I'll turn to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Elizabeth. We'll keep this short as well. Just kind of an informational presentation. What is wetland mitigation? Why do we do it? What is the reasons? It starts as a regulatory requirement when we have roadway projects, specifically at DOT, that impact a wetland. We'll touch on that a little bit later. We have to replace that, and that's governed by three different steps primarily. We have a federal requirement through the Army Corps of Engineers, a state level requirement with the Interagency Wetland Protection Act, as well as local ordinance that we have here at McHenry County. So what would cause a wetland impact? We have two main buckets really for the projects that we do: roadway improvements and bridge improvements. And a lot of our roadway improvements will have things with safety features, turn lanes, bike paths, sidewalks, adding travel lanes like Randall Road. We also have the bridge side where we're working near a river. We're working near an area that has wetland type areas, And if we're making that bridge wider, a lot of our bridges are getting higher and longer to accommodate new drainage requirements. And so when we go up, we go out a little bit too. And when we do that, we touch wetlands. How do we even determine what wetland mitigation is, or how do we bank? Well, if we impacted 1 acre of wetlands, which is a very large amount on most projects, we have to replace that at a higher ratio than what we impacted. And that's primarily driven by the Interagency Wetland Protection Act at the state level. For any public funded projects, we need to mitigate at least at 1.5 to 1 ratio. So for every 1 acre we impact, we have to replace 1.5 acres. The quality of the wetland also dictates how much your mitigation ratio is. Higher quality wetlands have higher ratios. They can range from 2 to 6 to 1. And even if we put wetland mitigation next to a project, which is an option we'll talk about, if in the future that project touched that mitigation, you'd have an even higher ratio than that. There have been some that are 10, 20, 8, 20 to 1 ratios. So smart placement of these wetland mitigation is super important as we move forward. How do we mitigate? There's 3 main types we'll talk about. One is on-site mitigation. This is an example that we did on Franklinville Road. Off to the side here was an area where we did a creek realignment, put in a new bridge, and off another space we created a wetland habitat to replace what we impacted when we moved the bridge around. But I'll tell you, McHenry County DOT, this is not our primary expertise. That's where the Conservation District comes in. We're good at this part. They are great at this part. But we have this on site, and so we're working through that, but it's not really our forte. There's also off-site mitigation, and that's site-specific per project. This is an example where we partnered with the Conservation District and the Alden Gap up in the Alden area. This is a picture from Google Maps, but it was during construction, post-construction, and here it is restored. This created wetlands to offset for a project that we had. They're the owners of the property, they become the stewards, they become the maintainers of that site in the future. It's a great partnership. Another way how we mitigate is with a wetland bank. And that can be public or private, and I use public in the term of a public agency like the Conservation District, but there are also private entities that own and construct these wetland banks. This is a picture of School Springs. We acquired over 3 acres from the Conservation District in their bank last year. This is a great partnership, but some of these costs, which we'll talk about later, whether it's with the Conservation District or the private banks, can be very high. So I did ask Conservation District to come out and help, and how can they help with DOT and the county here in moving forward more efficient, more cost-effective ways to do wetland mitigation. And there's 2 different buckets that they're able to help with, and Gabe's going to talk a little bit more about those.
Thank you. So the district has partnered with MCDOT in 2 separate ways, 2 methodologies through Army Corps, and these are specifically for federal wetlands. Obviously, the county has the ordinance for non-federal wetlands, and again, that's being determined by the Army Corps of Engineers. But the permitting responsible mitigation, the difference between that and mitigation bank is really where the liability is held. So MCDOT is responsible for ensuring that the mitigation ratios are met. We have the agreement between the 2, but if there's ever an issue, let's say the district wasn't able to provide the wetland, it really goes back to DOT for that liability. Certainly we have the agreement, so the district is going to work on making those ratios, but that's really the difference between permitting responsible and the next one, mitigation banking, I'll describe a little bit further. What will happen as far as the process goes is MCDOT will come to the district and say, hey, we have this potential impact that's upcoming. These are the wetlands, this is the watershed, these are the acres that we need to hit, and then the district will take a look at what's in our queue, some restoration projects that we would like to do, and see if there's something that we can match up. So from a regulatory standpoint, the regulator is going to be reviewing this on a project-to-project basis. So they want to make sure with that no net loss at the federal government level that the features of the mitigation project are being mitigated, the wetland features are being mitigated with that project. So they're going to be viewing it on a project-by-project basis versus the banking that I'll describe in the next slide. So the funding part will happen after the agreement is settled. The DOT, the county would fund the project, and then we would implement the project. The district has utilized the permittee responsible mitigation to kind of do some of the restoration projects that we would like to do, and then we use those funds actually, in most cases, to restore even more acreage, which is a benefit to not only district, but the people of McHenry County and the ecosystem services that these projects provide. So there's more mitigation, more wetland restoration that's taking place when we do these types of projects. And of course, the Army Corps really appreciates that with their whole no net loss accounting. So that's the district strategy there. One thing I do want to compare between the two is the level of monitoring and reporting. You can see on this slide here, those 4 green dots, those are locations of monitoring wells, and then those represent the terminus ends of transect. And you can see there's 2 transects for this one for our enhancement area, which I'll describe later, and then the other one for the reestablishment area. So what that means is from a reporting and monitoring standpoint, the costs are actually a little bit less for us when we're doing these types of mitigation versus a bank, which I'll describe next. So as you can see, I'll just do reporting real quick on this one, just because I talked about it. But the transects are the green lines there, and then those blue triangles are every place that we have a monitoring well. And as you can see, it's about 10-fold increase from the permittee responsible. And what that results in is a 10-fold monitoring, because there's a minimum of 10 quadrats on those transects. So you have vegetation monitoring that's occurring in meter by meter squared, and all that goes into a formula. What that results in is about a 100-page reporting document versus a 20-page reporting document between the two methodologies with the Army Corps. The big difference on the liability is the responsibility at a bank is the bank sponsor. In this case, the district has the bank here, the School Springs Bank. And when DOT would come to the district, it's just a transaction. There's no more responsibility once that transaction takes place because the Army Corps has provided their assurance that the credits are there. So it's really liability between the sponsor, the district in this case, and the Army Corps of Engineers. So the process for this, in the case of the School Springs Bank, the district funded the bank, and then afterwards, any transaction for released credits would come through those sales. The district's strategy for this, one thing about banking is you have to have a minimum of 20 acres. In this case, the Army Corps wanted us to have a minimum of 25 acres. So mitigation banking doesn't work everywhere. As far as reporting, I mentioned that already, but again, this is going to have a lot higher costs. And one thing about costs in particular that the district looks at is not only the cost to construct and implement through performance, but we're responsible for managing these parcels in perpetuity, so we have those costs to consider as well, long-term costs. The last one, Daryl had asked me to talk about just because there's this idea that we only need to preserve wetland, purchase wetland, and that's mitigation. That's actually not mitigation. Again, this no net loss concept. If you think of all the wetlands that we have right now, the federal government doesn't want to go below that. We want to have more wetlands on the landscape because of all the ecosystem services that they provide. So preservation is extremely rare when it comes to mitigation. In fact, you only get 10 to 15% if you do a preservation project, and it has to be an extremely high quality wetland. So you very rarely will see that in mitigation. So I put a little map here together, and this is a potential project, but you can see in the blue there, about 39 acres, that is existing wetland. So that wetland currently exists, and that would be considered an enhancement opportunity area. So the credit weight there, your maximum for enhancement is going to be about 10 to 15% of the total credit in a project. The red one there is the amount of acreage that is considered rehabilitation in the mitigation process, and that's actually determined by a farmed wetland determination. So it's currently in agriculture, in row crop, being farmed, so it has soil and hydrology, but not vegetation. And you only get a maximum of 50% credit for those. The ones where you get the most credit is where you have hydrology impact that has been removed from the landscape, agriculture, and no vegetation or hydrology. So then you get full credit. And there's some complicated ratios on figuring out this project as a whole, but there's percentages that you can only get a certain amount of credit weight. In this instance, you probably would look at this and say, hey, there's all this credit here. Actually, would you figure all this out? It's only about 70-ish acres of credit based on my projection that the Army Corps would allow. So it's not very simplistic when you take a look at wetland and actually considering it mitigation opportunity. And then there's also credit release schedules in a bank. You have to have certain performance thresholds. So that's actually what we're waiting for a transaction, is to meet hydrology and vegetation before you can have additional performance.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. Costs to mitigate. On-site mitigation that we talked about, the Franklinville Road example, they all vary because the site that you need, the replication, it's hard to estimate those types of ranges. But the bigger issue is that it requires additional right-of-way. We have to buy additional right-of-way on these spaces from the public areas around there to have space to do this mitigation. So it's kind of hitting a square peg through a round hole. You're trying to force something that doesn't really fit. We have to impact more to do the mitigation on site. Off-site mitigation, the costs vary again. Gabe gave a good example of some of these off-site mitigations that we've done, like the Alden Gap that we showed. But it requires a willing landowner. And like Gabe described, it doesn't fit everywhere. We need several of those different aspects that he was talking about to hit. So, hey, I need a willing landowner to give an easement or do the project, and then find that willing owner and a site that really works. Wetland banking is the easiest to kind of replicate, or from the DOT's perspective, control their own destinies. Having credits available in a bank, so as projects come up, we have a quick transaction and we can move forward. Partnering with the Conservation District can range between $100,000 to $125,000 an acre. And as Joe talked about, the resolution for Randall Road, $150,000 to $170,000 an acre. Because the region is so vacant, I guess, in credits right now, that's what we had to go for, and that's what they're working on, the credit rates. McHenry County DOT and the county partnering with the Conservation District is where we need to progress forward so that we have the best available information or best available assets from the wetland banking and continue that partnership. Ed's going to add a little bit about some of the past partnerships that we've got.
Sure. I guess the first thing I'd say is that we're exploring wetland mitigation today, but the DOT and the county and the district has a really long history of working together on different projects related to both transportation and to natural resources. So this is an obvious one that has to do with impacts to wetlands. But we also do inventories for the county when they require inventories from the regulatory agencies for things like bridge projects. So rather than contracting that out, district biologists will come in and do the same inventory gratis for the county, so that gets completed in a really efficient manner. We've removed freshwater mussels from bridge projects and relocated them downstream when the Department of Natural Resources have been concerned about those mussel populations. And it works the other way too. MCDOT has helped us to put in trails, and they've helped us to put in canoe launches, and they've incorporated best management practices on a lot of the projects they've done. So it's really been a long-term partnership, and it has tendrils in a lot of different directions. It's interesting that it fulfills not only our mission as a conservation district, but it also fulfills the mission and the goals in the strategic plan of the county for environmental stewardship. So when we work together, both agencies are able to accomplish those goals by working together. And I think that's kind of an ideal partnership to use as an example, because you often find transportation needs on one end, conservation needs on another end, and a conflict in between. And that's not been the case in McHenry County. We've been able to take those two important needs, moving people and goods and services around the county, and the county's natural resources, and combine them in a way that both work. So both of our agencies are very, very happy with that partnership. And we're hoping that as we go forward, we can take a look at how do we expand that partnership, both from an economic standpoint, in terms of making sure that those credits, which, by the way, are not going to do anything but go up in the next 10 years, are at a reasonable cost for our partners at the county, and how do we put more wetlands on the landscape. So we're kind of here to really say we're excited about the partnership going forward. We think we can make some real differences in both the natural resources and the transportation needs for the county, and we're hoping to bring you some pretty exciting things in the months to come. So I'll turn it back over to you, Darryl.
That's a good close. Thank you very much, Conservation District, and if you guys have any questions, we can take those now.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good day.
Sweet. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to new business. Do any members have items they'd like to remove from next Tuesday's agenda for discussion? Mr. Scala.
17B25.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Meshes?
11A2, 11A3, 11A4.
Mr. Kearns?
Add 11A5, 11B1, 11B2. Of course, those are on regular agenda, though.
Okay. Any others? Seeing none, Ms. Meshes, 11A2, 3, and 4.
There you go, okay. I don't know if anybody from staff is prepared to talk about the discussion of the zinc leaching into the water. I don't know, I saw Patty now, I don't know if she's prepared or if Adam knows anything about this, but like when the statement was made in public comment that zinc is as dangerous as lead, I certainly don't want to be responsible for the next metal poisoning in the county, right, so.
Sure. I am not prepared. Patty did join us. I'll allow her to answer that question on whether or not she's prepared. Yeah, there you go.
Gotcha.
So the answer would be no, not prepared, but I would be happy to research that for you. So in terms of groundwater issues, it's typically an Environmental Protection Agency requirement and is under their oversight. So of course, from the Public Health Department, we're going to be concerned about that impact, certainly on groundwater, but specifically on, water wells that would maybe then be utilizing contaminated water. So I'd be happy to research that for you. And I wrote some notes for myself, so I'll look into it and I'd be happy to bring back information to you.
All right, thank you. I mean, I also plan on Googling it, but an expert is better than a Google, I think, so, thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you. My question, I guess, pertains to all the solar farms, and we had put the amendments on the last couple months when we were going through these. My amendment from 2 meetings ago, I guess it was, about the changing the decommissioning paragraph. Is that something we intend to do, or do I need to bring it up, or will that be written out ahead of time here for us?
We'll prepare that for you again. Similarly, it was not included, I don't believe, on any of the 6 that were in before you on Tuesday.
Okay, so if you prepare it, it'll be in front of everybody and we can deal with it on Tuesday?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Kearns?
On that, Larry, I do intend, just like we did last month, to bring all 3 amendments that we did the first month. And there's a couple other ones that I'm researching right now. And on Plowshare, I had another possible amendment, which would be the access from the Township Road, Riley Township Road, to Harmony Road for the construction traffic. I would like to research that, and we're looking to make sure that the DOT would have no objection to granting that access. So the other thing, so that being said, I asked Adam before the meeting for the agriculture mitigation agreements, and you stated that all of them were applied for before we had hearings, or fulfilled and signed?
Correct.
So all of these have had their agriculture in our packets. I only found 2 of those that were in the packets as a display so we could read them. And I find as you're reading through these, and it's a lot of pages to read, and there's a lot of hours in this, but I'm finding a real inconsistency in each packet where one ended at 4 out of 54 pages. So there's a whole lot of documents there that weren't there. So I'd ask that before Tuesday, actually, hopefully way before that, we could update those packets to include all of that information, to review those a little bit further. And I know there's a lot of information to digest there between talking or those hearings and everything. I do appreciate, so I'm lumping all these into one, all the solar farms into one. And I do appreciate the plowshares packet and the work they've done and their donation to the environmental defenders. I do appreciate that work that they've put forward there and presented a very professional package. And I'd ask each of our members to, there's a lot of objections. I'm not saying how I'm voting on anything here today, but I will say that I'm not no on everything, and I'm not yes on everything. And I ask each of our members to vote your personal, individually on those. And I would ask that we vote on each of these on an individual basis instead of leaving them on a consent agenda, if that is possible.
If you pull them all, we'll do them one at a time.
Okay, so I intend to pull them all. I see some good ones, I see some ones that I'm not crazy about. But in that respect, when you read the laws on the, when you read the law that the governor passed, and you go through that and everything, there is no objection, or I agree with the state's attorney, it is silent on the matter of the 10 years. One thing I think maybe we should think on that amendment of the 10 years is that, it takes 2 or 3 years for some of these solar farms to be built. Or to not to be built, just to get their access and everything, and some of them may never get their access. But I would suggest that instead of, so if we went 10 years, if we went 30 years, whatever we set that evening, that we figure out a way that if they can't get their electrical connection for 2 years, that from the point that they were able to get that and begin their construction, that we would add that on to whatever the length is. In other words, they would still have their full 10 years of operation, full 20 years of operation, or full, if it took them 5 years to get that access point to hook up. Does that make sense? That way they get when they're doing whatever their project planning is, they know they've got of operation time. They've got a full year area. And I don't know if that's even, if anybody would object to that, but I'd like that to be part of that amendment. Adam, do you understand what I'm saying there? I'm always confusing.
No, we actually have a model like that in place, specifically with the Duke project, where there's a delay with the authority that grants the agreements. PJM, I think is the name of it. And so through the discussions, we recognize that that's just something that's beyond their control. It's another oversight governmental agency that has to go through their processes, so it does not penalize that particular group. And we can apply that same, or would apply that same concept to this and or any others that are subject to that type of delay.
Okay, that's great, because I would like to incorporate that onto that amendment of the 10 years, that would be classified in there. So a couple of these other ones, I'm going to talk about a couple of them individually. The rest of them I'm going to leave out. The Coral Township, when you're reading, that's the 11B1. When you're reading the hearing, going through all the statements and there was a big concern there of the railroad crossings with the construction equipment to get in there for the access. I think all of our board members should look at that one. There was quite a bit of input, and that one, I believe it did have 4 no votes on it from the ZBA. The other one is the Seneca one. And while that one's, we had a lot of discussion or a lot of public comment on that particular farm today. Our fencing is for the electrical, goes by the electrical thing, and it's 6 inches off of the ground. And that fencing, when they pull those, isn't very tight. If they're going to do livestock there.
Adam, just leave your mic on.
If they're going to do livestock under that one, which they're proposing, sheep, they're going to be underneath that fence, 6 inches off the ground. It needs to be tight to the ground. And I think that would be, and the tension on it would be necessary. Or those, they will push under it. You're going to have mutton on the road there. So I would ask that we do that. Also concerned about the water problem over there in the Union area. Now, I'm not saying anything on the contamination side of the post. I don't know any proof on that, and so I won't do that. But Union has had the history from environmental contamination to their well system over there. And I don't think we want Union to take another hit, be it 10, 20, 30 years. That was caused by a factory over there, that contamination of their wells. Whether or not this contaminates, I don't know. But I think maybe we do some testing. Maybe we could require testing wells on some of these sites where we have water problems. I don't know if that would be appropriate in this one or not, but maybe we put some monitoring wells out there on some of these solar farms where we have possible potential water table issues. So that's the only thing I want to bring about that one. That's all I have.
Mr. Reiner?
Thank you. So I think this part of, I have like 3 things I wanted to address, but I think this one might have been covered by Mr. Smith and Kearns, but when reading the zoning hearing for 11A2, Mr. Jers had mentioned that we are basically just giving them the zoning because there are no time limits to these variations. So I would imagine that in the amendments, we'll have the 10-year time limits for these variations to be reassessed. Question.
That's right. That's what Larry was asking about. And
Yeah.
so we'll provide those that were previously put together for the last 2 meetings.
Great, thanks. And, you know, moving forward, this is a question for the state's attorney's office. And maybe I'm wrong, Norm, but I think in the legislation, it said something so as that it's not in our zoning regulations. But would it be possible for us in the future to limit a freeze or moratorium on fertile farmland with productivity of so many bushels per acre, or also with any watershed land restrictions for taking the land out of ag production? I mean, can we put something in there that would have teeth in it from the future of not losing fertile farmland to this? Because it seems like we're giving an asset that we have for another asset that we want. And, you know, solar at all costs is fine, but it seems like we're tinkering with our water supply and our fertile farmland.
Well, you have to start with a premise that state statute says that you cannot make any of your restrictions, any of your governance more restrictive than that state statute. So if you start from that premise, if there isn't in that state statute language that says that you can weigh this out and say, gee, this is too fertile of farmland, and that's why we're not going to approve it, I would say no, that you can't use that as a basis to disapprove an application that would otherwise comply with the state statute.
Yeah, which just leaves my consternation of solar at all costs. Forget our water supply, forget our fertile farmland. Unintended consequences here. Thank you.
Mr. Gottemoller?
Yes, I'm concerned on 11A3 and 11A4. That's the one that the Land Conservancy, McHenry County Land Conservancy said they have an easement on it and they've not authorized this to be before us. If they actually have the rights to the land to control what goes on the land, and they do with a conservation easement, this shouldn't be before us. It should be something that maybe we handle beforehand. We don't have the right to actually change the zoning on a piece of land where there's an owner, and they only own the easement, but they own the easement to the land, that says no. That needs to be sorted out before it gets here. My proposal would be that I would continue this to let those two groups decide whether they're going forward or not. They got to sort that out before it comes to us for a vote.
Ms. Beshes?
Thanks. Yeah, so before I was just speaking for A2, but I will speak generally for the bunch. So I also had pulled 3 and 4 for the same reason that Board Member Gottemoller had pulled it about the questions of the easement. Like what I read in the ZBA's transcript was that the ZBA didn't feel that we could enforce the easements, but it seemed to me to be a sticking point, and I was wondering about that same question. The other item I've been thinking about, I know for the last 2 months we've been putting on the additional amendments to the resolutions for these petitions about the 10-year granting period. But given that solar farms have a 25 to 30-year lifespan, is it realistic that after 10 years you would ever say, no, pull all this up and get rid of it? And I'm like noticing audience members. There was a reason why we made these, didn't put the 10-year amendment on these in the first place. And it seems to me that it makes it very difficult to go forward on these projects when they can't get investors, when there's a threat that after 10 years we're gonna say, no, get out, you have to leave. So I'm thinking maybe we're not being thoughtful when we've put that in the past, that we're gonna reevaluate these every 10 years. Even if we did include Board Member Kern's suggestion that it's 10 years after they start, it is basically a roadblock I could see being put in. None of them are going to come in because nobody's going to fund something that's going to get pulled after it's a third's lifespan's up. All right, now I am done. So thank you.
Ms. Campbell?
Oh boy, I've been thinking about this for a really long time, so there's a lot of things running through my head right now. But to get back to what we talked more recently when you're talking about the bonding, or not the bonding, the conditions. So first of all, as Norm has indicated, we by law can't be putting conditions on here, otherwise we can potentially be opening us up to a lawsuit. So some of us did vote no to the conditions, but then did go ahead and vote for the solar permits. So this is kind of a really touchy situation, but I do really appreciate the fact that every one of us here is frustrated by the lack of control and the taking away of the controls that we had in place. We had a really good system. So one of the things I had wanted to do was bring forward some conditions, okay? So I'm going against what I had said in the first place. But our conditions that I think that that they're thoughtful, they're fair, and probably less likely to get us sued if we're following them in the interest of not only the permitters, but trying to protect, what we're trying to do here in the county. So I do question, where did it go? So the 3 that we had placed, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, but any changes in the state law apply to the permit. They have to reapply every 10 years with the modifications that Member Kearns is talking about. And yes, they have to they have to renew or reapply every 10 years. Okay, and you're talking about the modifications there. And then the 10-year review of the bonding, which is actually in the AMA report, and it's also in our ordinance. So just kind of redundant, but it's, it certainly is already being done. So to Member Mesh's point, I mean, if some projects that are pretty well funded, they may not care about having, the 10-year review. It is something that could open us up to liability. But for other projects, they're not going to get the financing they need if the banks feel that in 10 years that project can be pulled. And so what I would almost recommend, we're trying to make sure that we have some oversight. I would suggest that the conditional use permit, one of the things I would do, so, I'm sorry, members, it's distracting when there's sidebar conversations, I'm sorry. The conditional use, so we can talk about the fact that it takes time for these things to get in the ground. So if after 10 years, it is not in the ground, then we can say the permit is pulled and you have to reapply. Okay, so that thing isn't hanging out there indefinitely. The other thing I would suggest is instead of this 10-year framework, just say if they meet everything, they've met the requirements, they've gone through the permitting process, to allow them to get their financing, we give them a 40-year permit. It's very much in line with the type of projects that are out there. Most of these are leased. I would assume that of all the ones that we're getting, most of them involve a lease with an existing landlord. And if you allow for that process to play out and then they're decommissioned in 40 years, then I would say then that CUP is no longer held on that land. And that gets to this comment that it's a permanent zoning change, which it actually really isn't because it doesn't change its zoning as agriculture, but it gets that CUP off of that particular property. And if they want to do something in 40 years, they can do something in 40 years. We could look at a renewal process if there is nothing in the ground or if they haven't started construction. Maybe there's a certain number of a couple of years or whatever that has to be done. I know that puts more work on the part of staff, but if that's something people wanted to think about. But something like that to me is still going against the law, but I think it allows us to have something in place that protects not only us, but the people who are applying. And then I'm assuming they will not turn around and sue us because we're both getting what we want, a little bit more control, but they get some continuity in their project. I do want to say one other thing, and I don't want to get too involved, but with this process, one of the things we're hearing from people is, or we're getting kind of either from the ZBA or just people in general, that we have to say no because of safety. We have to say no because there's too many, whatever's going on with that. The problem, this is just a conditional use permit, and the process has changed. So all of the staff plat review that was done ahead of time, that would have helped these projects understand what their conditions were going to be. Sometimes that helps to weed people out ahead of time. Some of these things regarding safety, that's going to come through the permitting process. Us saying, we could still say yes. They're going to go through the permitting process, and they're going to have to work with the DOT on access and roads. They're going to have to make sure they're following the soil and water recommendations, the stormwater management ordinance, and everything else. So I think that we still have protections in place. It's just that they come through the permitting process as well. So.
Ms. Wagner?
Thank you. Thank you, Member Campbell, for your comments. I agree with the premise and many of the points you made. I have a couple questions. So is there anybody here in representative of the Wildcat Solar? Because following up on Member Gottemoller, because TLC has denied that easement, it looks like even if we vote for it, it's not going to work. So is that something we as a board should just send back to the zoning commission? Really it shouldn't be on our agenda. How would we deal with that?
Norm? Yeah. Adam?
Go ahead, you have the floor,
Yeah.
Norm.
Quite frankly, I'm not sure how we would deal with that. I think there are two ways to look at it. Like, the county has their process, and do we normally take into account easements and other things that are out there when there's zoning petitions and conditional use petitions? And let's say we were to grant it, then would it be the Land Conservancy that would go to court and say, wait a second, as like an injunction against that solar company to say, wait a second, we have an easement, we're not granting it, we're not allowing you to come across our land and do this. So it could be a litigation fight between them. If we were to deny it, it could be litigation between the three of us, all three of us involved in that. But in all candor, I'm not sure what direction that would go.
Okay. All right.
Can I just get some clarification on that? Because my understanding is the permitting process would catch that. And maybe, I don't know if Renee would have an answer for that, but if there's an easement or if there's some kind of issue that would come out, you know, ours is just saying that we're allowing the permit process to go through. And it's during that permit process that these things get ironed out. So whether it's a safety issue, you know, people say, you know, the Union one was not safe because of the railroad crossing. Okay, well, during the permitting process, the Union Railway or Pacific Railway are going to deny the access, and that's going to stop it right there. And Renee, am I correct on that, or?
You are, yes.
Okay, so I don't think this is going to end up in litigation. I think that this is how the process works.
So basically, we should just approve it and
You-
then they'll work it. Okay.
That's
All
right.
Thank you. Also, I want to ask, I agree with, I think 10 years is pretty limited on when we end our conditional use permit. I'll reiterate that it is difficult to find financing. I think we need to consider changing it to 40 or not putting anything at all, due to the risk of litigation. But I'm okay with, I mean, I think, 10 is too little. I agree we should put 40. And then the last thing I have, Member Kearns mentioned monitoring wells. Is that something we can legally put in our approval of this? If we're looking at the one in Union.
If it's not in the statute to do it, I don't believe you can. I mean, we could do it at our own dime, but to make them do it, I don't believe you can put that burden on them.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Kearns?
Okay. Statute was silent on time. In our amendments in the past, we've said that if the law changes, they would have to be brought up to that law. So if the law changed, the state, and I'll refer back to the ICE contract. This board voted to keep the ICE contract. And you say, what's that got to do with it? The state came in, changed the law, and said that we couldn't keep the ICE contract with the nation. So let the state come back to us and say, you got to make it 20 years or 30 years. There's nothing about this time frame. So in history of this board since I've been on the board, and I can't speak for other boards, but I've asked the question of how many conditional uses that came back to re-up that the board has turned down. There's only one that I know of. There might be a few more, but there was only one, and that was for a reason of noise and some other issues. But that was prior to me being on the board, but I do remember I was actually at that meeting. So, you know, in good faith, we're not trying, or at least I am not with the 10 years, I'm not trying to stop the solar farms. What I feel here is that in 10 years, technology's changed tremendously. Those solar farms, every one of these is an LLC. Their financing, they should, if they're not financially stable to do this on their own, what are they gonna do in 8 years when the federal government money dries up? I mean, our state right now is in financial trouble over the years. And when that money dries up, they've got to be able to stand on themselves, on their own. their own 2 feet. The 10 years allows this board that if those solar farms, and by the way, the 10 years is what we're granting on almost every conditional use out there that we've done here as a board. So we're running along that same tract of 10 years. If in 9 years or 10 years, 15 years, if we renew it, that solar farm goes bust, they walk away from it, whatever, all of a sudden you have a sensitive watershed or water area that has poisoned the wells and everything. Right now, you can't do a darn thing about it. But if it came up, we could say, well, this particular one, we would, and we'd want you to update and make some changes, at the very least, if you have some things. Also, technology is gonna change at some point, where possibly the solar farms aren't profitable, just like the electric batteries in cars. At some point, technology is gonna change, and possibly we have a different type of a battery, hydrogen, different things like that they've talked about. And the technology changes, and this technology goes away. So the length of time for me is not out of the ordinary. It falls right in with what we've done as a county all along with all of our conditional uses. Some of these earlier solar farms, we did approve for longer terms. And as we did with some of our other conditional uses that weren't solar farms, we approved them for longer terms. So in general practice, I believe we have that right. Now, other people will say, it's not in the statute, so we just have to believe that's what it is. Well, you know what? Let the state come back and change their law to say it's got to be 30 years or whatever they're going to do. And then we have covered it because we've said that it changes automatically because it follows the law. But right now, we are following the law if we go to the 10-year. Now, if they don't have the financing to do this outright, they probably shouldn't be in this business anyway. I'm sorry, and somebody's going to jump on me to my right now. She's going to jump on me on that. But that's okay, because when the financing goes away and the subsidy goes away, they've got to be able to make it. And the 10-year gives us protection to our landowners and everyone else. We shouldn't stick this, and it does, and people say, what happens when you don't have enough bonding or everything else? It goes back to the landowner who cut the deal with them. Well, we've had other ones that we've dealt with in housing subdivisions and everything, that they're pretty, our residents are stuck in a pickle over that. And the neighbors of those, not the landowner, but the neighbors are stuck in a bad situation where they're looking at a deteriorated property. So I'm going to stick with my original thing of the 10 years. I just wanted to answer that to everybody, because I know someone would like the 40 years, but this indefinite time is just wrong. We shouldn't be doing an indefinite time. And is what it is.
Thank you. I think we're getting a little deep in the weeds here. Let's keep it on the topic of the individual merits of what's before us here, 11.234 right now. These discussions could be had outside of here, and I think we've covered it pretty well already. So, Ms. Campbell.
I'm sorry, I guess I was just going to speak more generally to the.
Yeah, I think we've had plenty of that discussion already.
Yeah.
Mr. Reinert?
I guess I don't know if I fall into this or not, but I just know from commercial loans, the term of the conditional use has no specific relativity to the commercial loan. I mean, that could still be a 20-year loan on a 10-year conditional use. The bank is going to have to trust that lender too, or that borrowee too. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further comments on these, Mr. Kearns, did we already cover the ones that you wanted to pull? Seems like we did. Okay. Ms. Altoff.
Just real quickly, I don't think there's anybody on this board that doesn't feel that their main purpose is to represent their constituents within their districts as well as, in McHenry County as a whole. We're all entitled to our opinions, that's why we vote. I just want to make sure that people are recognizing that we are part of a process. And if we start determining that we don't have to pay attention to laws and to process, we're not setting a very good example for our constituents who come to us and have to pay fees, or for people who talk to us about rodeos and what are we doing about them. So please remember that you are the people's voice, but you also are part of a very significant process and have a responsibility to that as well. So my question is this, and it is relevant. We've placed conditions on some of these requests for solar farms. We're talking about doing that again on Tuesday. If they fall outside of the parameters of the authority that the county board is given, what's our enforcement availability to ensure that those entities meet conditions that perhaps are considered illegal or unenforceable? What do we do then? Do we find ourselves in litigation? Is that ultimately up to those petitioners to come back? Or do they just say, okay, fine, and start construction and wait for us to somehow respond? That's my question.
Is that rhetorical?
No. Absolutely not. It's similar to the response, I think, that we got with regard to the easement question. So it might be repetitive, but it is a question.
I think it could go a couple of different ways. And it depends on which side of the fence you're on. If I am a solar developer, I probably want an answer sooner than later. Let's say you get to the end of the 10 years, and I'm not going to apply again. And then if you sue me, if the county sues me, I'm going to say, well, that wasn't effective back then. And I'm going to defend it that way. On the other hand, they may wait till the 10 years and then sue for the extension on that and say it has to be extended. There was no time frame even allowed.
Thank you.
Ms. Campbell.
Wasn't there a statute of limitations of a year? They wouldn't necessarily have that ability in 10 years.
Yeah, I think, and it depends on the theory they would sue under. Again, if I were them, I'd make it sooner than later. I wouldn't even take the chance.
Okay. So no further discussion. Mr. Scott, 17B25.
Hey, let's change subjects a little bit. 17B25, I've just pulled this one so that I can inform the board as to what occurred with this. So this is for the board's outside auditor, and it was brought forward at our finance committee meeting. The contract that we have currently with Baker Tilly will be expiring, and Carrie had brought forward a resolution to renew with Baker Tilly. This was done a little bit different in the sense that similar to other contracts, typically in the transportation department, we piggyback on other public entities that have gone through a bidding process. So because this is an auditor, it's a request for proposal, not a bid with actual lowest bid for numbers. Adam went to Lake County, who just went through a process on reviewing for their external auditor, and they went through, I'll say, their matrix and looked at the different companies that had bid and chose Baker Tilly by a pretty large margin. For those board members that were not here 4 years ago when we as a county went through the same process, we chose Baker Tilly, and again, it was pretty big margin that Baker Tilly was awarded the RFP back 4 years ago. So it's nice to see that Lake County kind of came to the same conclusion based on the services that they are offering. There was some, well, there wasn't some. There was quite a bit of discussion at finance regarding this resolution. I know that one of the questions came up pertaining to the pricing that was listed in the resolution. Carrie, if you don't mind, I know you like the limelight, so I was going to put you on the spot here, but if you could share with the board the outcomes of that part of it.
Yeah, so I reached out to Baker Tilly just to make sure that we kind of had everything covered. And right now, in the current contract that's before you is a 6% increase. And so they're willing to give us a 5% increase, which I think based on their service, their size, just, they do the audits for Kane, Will, Winnebago, DeKalb, Rock Island, DuPage, Lake. So I think it's not just a matter of cost, but also getting the best for the county. The process was just a little, I think we're still doing what's in the best interest of the county, but if we can also do that and save some time, I think that's beneficial for all of us. And so, with the decrease in price, the other counties, I have excerpts from multiple accounting reviews and CPA firms I can forward to you that talk about, you don't necessarily have to have audit firm rotation to have a good quality audit. And some even talk about, that I think this one says, the new study argues that both professional skepticism and trust can coexist. And, we've had a really good relationship with them. They really, really help us. And I think if anything, they know us so well, they can dig in even more so. So does that kind of?
Yeah, I was going to the cost, but you added a bunch. That was great. I think the other thing that I wanted to point out was 4 years ago, we had requested of Baker Tilly to change personnel over. Part of the external audit process is that, you want people with different perspectives and different ways of viewing auditing. And so Baker Tilly has held true to that for the last 4 years and has turned over personnel. And I don't even know if there's anyone that did it 4 years ago that's still doing it. I think everyone's new. I mean, the team that's doing it this year is probably at least a third new, if not almost a half new, of people. And so part of this discussion that Adam had with Baker Tilly was that they will continue to do that turnover so that they have new principals and people looking at our audits. So it'll be kind of the best of both worlds in the sense that we'll have some people on the team that have done it the previous year so they can offer perspective, but also new people so that they can kind of look at things in a different perspective. So it was this is pulled just for informational purposes only. Don't have any concerns and would be more than happy to keep them as our auditor for the next 4 years.
Okay. Ms. Greeno?
For our edification, what are the costs associated with going out for an RFP, taking in the data, analyzing it, and making a selection?
There's no cost for the actual RFP.
Well, right, but you have to evaluate it. I mean, it takes manpower
Besides
to do an
time,
RFP,
yes.
to put it together.
Outside
go
of our
out.
time.
Yeah.
And then also too, I think there's an industry-wide shortage of qualified firms. So I think that will also maybe drive the responses that we get.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, or the pricing.
Right, I just thought it would be good for the board to know, because there are costs associated with it, and now
Correct.
by being able to utilize Lake County, then that could be a great savings. I mean, it might be 5 figures, it might be 6 figures, I don't know. 4 figures? I doubt that.
Ms. Beshes?
Thank you. So to address one of the concerns brought to my attention was that we have a review committee that in the past was able to assess the qualifications of the specific members of Baker Tilly who came to do the audit. Who's part of that review committee in our county, and what has been the experience of reviewing qualifications and concerns about that?
I'm not sure that we have a formal review policy. You mean for the auditors that?
We did 4 years ago.
Yes, we did 4 years ago, but, I mean, all the staff that they're sending us are qualified.
Well, I would assume.
Okay,
Otherwise,
yeah, I
they
don't-
wouldn't hire unqualified staff. I don't know, it was just the statement that the firm may have pitched us staff in the past to use. We've never had oversight on who comes. We hire Baker Tilly. Baker Tilly sends their staff. They do their job. I mean, I've obviously never been part of an audit at all, ever. So, I was just looking for a statement on that, but.
We've never had issue with their staff or the quality of the work, but I
Yeah.
feel if we did and we asked them to switch it out, switch the auditor out, that I think that they would accommodate that.
Okay. We've never had an experience where we've had that issue, we've asked for that.
No, not in the
20 years.
In the 4 years I've been involved.
Yeah. Okay, I was assessing, I'm realizing none of you have been here for 20 years, probably. So. All right, thank you.
Mr. Scala?
Just to kind of go back on that, I mean, I want to be clear, the outside auditors are the county board's auditors. I mean, it's supposed to be our outside look at what staff is doing. And truly, so if anything, we should be doing that, not staff. I mean, you want an independent auditor to be independent. So you don't want staff to have a say in who's doing that outside independent audit. So I think if the work product that we see and that we read, we have questions or concerns about, by all means, we should be making comments to Baker Tilly about that. But I personally think it's a conflict if staff's getting into that.
Okay, seeing no further discussion. Pete, you got a report for us today?
I'll send something out in writing. It's a little late, so thank you.
We are going to have a brief executive session today, so I'll entertain a motion to do that according to 5 ILCS 122C11 with probable litigation. Ms. Greeno makes the motion, Ms. Meshes seconds. Kathy, could you call the roll, please? And general public will have to leave for this. We'll be adjourning immediately afterwards, so you're not going to miss anything. Smile bigger. Kathy? Sorry.
Pamela Altoff. Yes. Carolyn Campbell. Yes. Joe Gottemoller. Terry Greeno. Eric Hendricks. Carl Kaminsky. James Kearns. Matthew Kunkel. Teresa Meshes. Lou Ness. John Reinhardt. Brian Sager. Michael Shorten. Michael Scala. Larry Smith. Gloria Van Hoff. Tracy Von Bergen. Kelly Wagner. Chairman Bueller.
Yes.